Monarch butterflies are disappearing and time may be running out. That is the findings of a new report from scientists from UGA and Emory. Populations of the eastern monarch butterfly have fallen by about 80% since the 1990s, one of the steepest declines of any well-known pollinator. The UGA Emory study found warmer temperatures significantly increase parasite growth, overwhelming monarchs' natural defenses, and monarchs carrying the parasite show reduced flight ability, making the 3,000-mile migration far less likely to succeed. Let's look at this decline with Sonia Altizer. She is the lead author of this study and professor at the UGA College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. We're glad to have you with us. Now, for viewers who may not follow monarch science closely, what problems were you trying to solve with the study?
Well, so we know that monarch migration is in trouble, and monarchs are facing a lot of threats these days. We have been studying for the past 30 years a microbe, a tiny parasite that infects them. And what we've seen is that the number of monarchs that are infected with this parasite has gone up over time. We also know that in warmer places, monarchs tend to have a higher chance of being infected with this parasite. So like in the southeastern United States along the Gulf Coast, we see a lot of infected butterflies. And so we thought, well, maybe there's something about temperature and heat that is benefiting the parasites. And because these parasites can make it harder for monarchs to migrate, it's important to answer this question.
So what is a specific parasite you study and how does it actually hurt monarch butterflies? What's it doing?
Well, this parasite's called Ophreucystis electrospira, so we just call it OE for short. And it infects caterpillars. So caterpillars become infected when they're feeding on milkweed plants that have parasite spores on them. And it develops inside the bodies of the caterpillars and the chrysalis, and then adult monarchs come out covered with millions of dormant parasite spores all over the outsides of their bodies to pass it on to the next generation. And butterflies that are infected, they tend to be a little bit smaller, they live shorter lives, they reproduce less well, and they migrate less well. So this really is a debilitating disease for monarchs. And if they have to migrate, you can think about it. If you have the flu and you had to run a marathon, you probably wouldn't do very well. And it's the same thing for these butterflies. Some of them have to migrate, thousands of miles to get to their overwintering sites in Mexico in the fall. And if they're heavily infected, they often drop out of the migration and don't succeed.
Now, you mentioned the temperatures briefly. How did the warmer temperatures change what you saw in the infected monarchs?
Well, it was a really surprising result of this study because we knew that when we raised monarchs in the lab under constant temperatures, parasites did not do well in the heat. At temperatures above roughly like 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which there's many days in the summer here in Georgia where it's above 90 degrees. But at those temperatures, the parasites don't survive well. They don't infect the monarchs very well. And so we thought when we moved out into the field under natural conditions that we'd see the same thing. And so we put milkweed plants and caterpillars out in the field. We covered them with tiny little greenhouses to elevate the temperatures around them. And then what we saw was actually the opposite. When monarchs were raised under warmer temperatures, they were actually more likely to become infected. And then some of the plants that they feed on have toxins that monarchs can concentrate in their own bodies and defend themselves against predators and parasites. And those toxic plants lost their medicinal effects for the butterflies in helping them defend against infection when they were raised under warmer temperatures. So the outcome of this experiment is that it looks like under natural conditions, a warmer world might be a sicker world for monarchs. They're less able to defend against infection and they're more susceptible to disease.
So what's the biggest takeaway you want people to understand from this study? We got 30 seconds.
So I think that what we want people to understand is that monarchs get sick too. Butterflies get sick just like people can get sick. And that it's really important to understand how this is changing in response to environmental change. And so we want people to go out there to see the butterflies, to look at their environment, think about what's happening to them, and their importance for the ecosystem.